What if I told you that a tiny piece of metal, a forgotten family heirloom, could unlock a century-old mystery? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into. This is a story that connects a legendary World War I airship to the very science that lets us fly today. It's a real-life historical detective story.
So, take a look at this. This little fragment of metal, barely 3 centimeters long, was a family's pride and joy for generations. The story they told was that it came from a famous German airship shot down in a blaze of glory. But here's the thing. That story, it wasn't quite right. And science was about to reveal a truth that was way, way more interesting.
All right, so before we bust out the microscopes and get into the science, we have to understand the legend. We need to hear the heroic story this little piece of metal was supposed to represent for over 100 years.
To get this, you have to imagine you're in London back in 1916. Giant German airships, people called them baby killers, were this terrifying, seemingly unstoppable new weapon. And then, one night, a pilot named Lieutenant William Robinson did the impossible. He actually shot one down over the village of Cuffley. The country went absolutely nuts. The guy was an instant national hero, awarded the Victoria Cross just 2 days later.
Now, the airship that went down was the SL-11, and this thing was colossal. Just a massive structure filled with incredibly explosive hydrogen. You can imagine the scene when it crashed. The site became an instant tourist attraction. I mean, thousands of people flocked there, digging through the wreckage, hoping to grab a souvenir. And this, so the story goes, is where our little metal fragment came from. A tangible piece of a historic victory.
Okay, let's hit the fast-forward button and jump ahead a century. This very same fragment ends up in a scientist's lab. And this is where that simple family legend starts to completely unravel, all thanks to some really cool material science.
So analysis showed the fragment was made from a pretty remarkable material called Duralumin. This stuff was a cutting-edge German invention back then. It's an aluminum alloy, so it's incredibly light, but it's also super strong. But here's its secret power. After it's heat-treated, it just magically gets harder all by itself over a few days. For building things that fly, this was an absolute revolution.
So how does that magic actually work? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like dissolving sugar in a hot cup of tea. When you heat the metal up, the copper atoms dissolve into the aluminum, just like sugar disappears in hot water. But as the metal cools back down, these tiny, ultrafine particles of copper reappear. And these little particles act like microscopic roadblocks, making it way harder for the metal to bend or deform. That's what makes it so incredibly strong. And check this out. If you actually plot that magic trick on a graph, this is what you see. The material's hardness literally climbs higher and higher over time, all on its own, just sitting at room temperature. This is a process called age hardening, and it's what made Duralumin a total game changer for aviation.
So, we've got our science, right? The fragment is Duralumin. Case closed? Not so fast. Because when you put that scientific fact up against the historical story, the whole thing falls apart. This is where the plot really thickens.
This became the one crucial question that changed everything. The science was a slam dunk, but was the history? Could this little Duralumin fragment really be from that famous SL-11? The lab results were about to go head-to-head with a 100-year-old family legend.
And here it is. This is the bombshell. The fragment is Duralumin, but the historical records are crystal clear about the Shetland's SL-11. Its frame was made of wood. The whole thing was basically a wooden skeleton stretched with fabric. There was no Duralumin on it at all. You see the problem, right? Science and history are in a direct face-off. This treasured family heirloom, this piece of history, simply could not have come from the famous Cuffley airship. The story was wrong, which of course leaves one giant question. If it didn't come from the SL-11, where in the world did it come from? But hey, the investigation didn't just stop there. True detectives don't give up that easily. If the fragment wasn't from the SL-11, the researchers had to find another suspect. And it turns out the clue they needed was hiding in plain sight. And they got a huge break. A key clue that came from the Imperial War Museum. It turns out that the Cuffley crash site was so famous that when other airships were shot down later, their wreckage was brought to the exact same field for people to see. And, you guessed it, for souvenirs to be sold. All the different pieces of wreckage just got mixed together. So what were these other airships? They weren't the wooden Schutzalons type. Oh no, they were the even more famous Zeppelins.
And unlike the wooden SL-11, Zeppelins were built with a revolutionary, rigid metal framework. And can you guess what metal they used for that framework? You got it, Duralumin.
And just like that, everything clicks into place. The puzzle is solved. The Fragment wasn't from that first wooden-framed airship at Cuffley. It was from a more advanced Zeppelin, whose wreckage was displayed right there next to it. The souvenir was real. The family had just, over time, attached it to the more famous original story.
So the family mystery is solved, which is great. But in a much bigger way, the story of this little piece of metal was really just beginning. Because the legacy of duralumin, the material itself, would go on to literally change the world.
I mean, just look at this connection. You can draw a straight line across 100 years of flight. The same revolutionary ideas of lightweight, high-strength design that were pioneered in these World War I Zeppelins, well, they became the foundation for all of modern aviation. What started as a weapon of war became the key to our modern, connected world.
In fact, the super sophisticated aluminum alloys that we use to build massive modern airplanes like the Airbus A380, they are the direct descendants of that original duralumin. So that small fragment isn't just a piece of a Zeppelin. It's a tiny piece of the very first chapter of the aerospace engineering we know today.
It's pretty wild to think about, isn't it? A material that was designed to solve a very specific problem, how to build a better German airship in World War I, ended up shaping our entire modern world of travel. It really makes you wonder, what other revolutionary technologies that we use every single day were born from solutions to problems we've completely forgotten about?